Welcome to the Joe Watt podcast. I am Joe Vendramini from the University of Florida Range Cattle Research and Education Center, and today our guest is Mr. Matt Pearce from Okeechobee, Florida. Matt, thanks for being with us today.
Thanks, Joe. Appreciate you having me.
Matt, I would like you please to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you.
Okay, Joe. I'm a sixth-generation Florida rancher. I grew up in FFA and showing cattle and learning about agriculture. Grew up on a 6,000-acre ranch in Glades County that my family owned. That's where I got my basis of, horsemanship and handling cattle and working cattle and being around cows. I went to high school in Okeechobee and went to ABAC to school and got a associates in ag business. And then I came back and worked for some large ranches like Rollins Ranch, Adams Ranch, Bright Hour Ranch when they were in existence. And then went into the sales force working with Electron Animal Health when they were in the animal health business. And then recently, about 20 years ago, I guess, I went to work for Purina, and I've been with them for 20 years now.
And Matt, I think one of the parts of your business has been the heifer development. So we will try to focus our conversation on heifer development, but we can expand as we need. And the first thing on the heifer development of your program, I'd like to ask you on the genetics standpoint, what do you think is an attractive heifer for your program?
Okay, Joe. So a little bit about our program. I mean, we source about 500 head of heifers a year. Now, I can't make those heifers from my operation. One day I'd like to get to there, but we have to buy a lot of heifers. So when I look at the genetics, I look at known sires, whether it be through the Brangus breed or the Beefmaster breed or Brayford and Brahman. I mean, all these heifers I have to have a percentage of Brahman influence, at least 3/8 or better. I mean, I don't deal with a lot of half bloods or better because I have trouble getting them bred. But there is some longevity in there. So what I'm looking for is known genetics from the sire side and then a core cow herd. So I've got 3 or 4 guys that I'll buy large groups of heifers, replacement heifers, that are paying good money for bulls that have got proven EPDs and genetics behind them. Like I say, whether it be Brangus, Brayford, or Beefmaster. So that's kind of the cornerstone is and what I have to do to buy them is to get known genetics of where they come from.
And Matt, considering the buyers that come to get heifers from you, do you think they would have a preference for a specific breed or color, or you have all different types of buyers and all preferences?
So to answer your question, most of the buyers that I deal with would prefer a black heifer, above the Brangus influence. But in our program, we'll have probably 60% Brangus heifers. True Brangus heifers with some, ear and navel that'll have some longevity, and then we'll have the balance of that, 20% Beefmaster, 20% Brayford type. So there, I've got a clientele that likes the red cattle, and that's growing. That's one thing I've seen is the growing of red cattle, whether it be in Santa Gertrudis type or Brayford or Beefmaster, but those are. And there's some excellent genetics out there that are going to the maternal side, and that's where those breeds have done a good job, and that's where that demand's come from.
And Matt, on this program that you sometimes raise or buy your heifers, so you probably target to breed them as yearlings, right?
That's correct. Yeah, we just AI'd a set of heifers in Florida here in Okeechobee, and then those heifers would have been August and September of last year, so they'd be 15 months old or so.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's the target.
As you mentioned the AI, we can transition to the reproduction part. And what is your criteria to AI a group of heifers, or to turn the bull out, or if you do both in the same group?
So in where we send the heifers in Alabama, which will go to grazing, they all get natural sired. So what we'll do is we'll sort those into weight and age groups, and we'll have 2 bull turn-in dates. We'll turn in the 1st of December on the heavier cattle, which will be the older cattle, and then we'll turn in January 1st, 30 days later, to let those other cattle keep up. And then that gets a couple things done. We get them bred when they're mature and weigh enough, and then also we'll have 2 calving seasons that will be 90 days. Well, they're actually 72 days. We only expose those heifers for 72 days. They get 3 heat cycles, and then there's another set that comes behind them. So we can sort those up into 30-day pregnancy windows, and that's how we add some value and sell those heifers. But the cattle in Florida, we typically, there'll be 100 head of those, and we'll AI those every year because they're on this facility that we can handle them through the chute 3 times. They're easy, they're gentle. It's usually a 2-man crew that works them, and they're usually the bigger, better end of the heifers. We try to take the smaller end and not even wean those as a replacement. So there'll be some good heifers that don't make it because of age and weight.
And Matt, with your experience in AI in those heifers, what you can tell us that you learn over time on the protocol and the procedure and the outcome?
That's a good question because I think everybody struggles with that. We've done this. This is our 5th year, and we have a strict criteria. They have to meet the age and weight, and then what we try to shoot for. Well, just to back up, the reason we started this was when bulls were so expensive, or when people thought they were expensive at the peak of the cow cycle, and calves were bringing $1,400. Bulls were expensive. So what we were trying to do is to AI some cattle and cut down our bull turnout in half. So our target was 50%. Well, the first year we did it, I think we got a 25% conception rate, and we were discouraged. But we changed our protocol. We moved, the next year, and we got better. So we peaked out at about 37%. My target's 50%. I think, we'll know in a couple weeks how these heifers did, and I'm pretty optimistic because we changed some things. There's some things next year with Dr. Manelli that we're already going to change for next year, and working with him and the university to reprotract score some cattle, to do some puberty work, I guess you would call it, and try to reach that target. But I think when you take 100 heifers, and if you're realistic, there's only 80% of them that really are worth or meeting your target, but you got the 20 in there with them, so you're going to run them through the program. So if you start with 80 and you're only going to get 40, when you back those numbers out, that's where we're at on that 30%. If you really cut your numbers and started with the best, you would be at 50%. And that's our target. But we'll see what this year's done. But it's a rigorous schedule that we go through. And what we found on the AI heifers is when we go through the program, what doesn't get bred AI is coming in that first heat after it. So most of the heifers, about 60% of them are calving in the first 30 days, which is a big benefit in what we do.
So that would be my next question, but you just answered. So you think there is a value in the hormonal treatment, that even if you don't AI those heifers, you can get them bred with bulls, and they will come earlier and probably more tight?
Yeah, that's correct, because you're starting that system, and whether you catch them through the AI, if you don't, then you've got your bull service, and yeah, I would agree with that. That's kind of our target. We're seeing that, in the first 30 days, the majority of the cattle having calves.
And I don't want it to be bounced around, but when you talk about the AI, I think it's an important thing. So when you AI, you have much more flexibility on the bull, right? Because you can go to a catalog and pick and select. So when you do your heifers, what is your target there selecting a bull for those heifers?
Well, we're trying to find a low birth weight, calving ease bull. That's the main thing. That's the first criteria. And then second would be, some sort of carcass merit, because these cattle are going to be early weaned. And so we're not necessarily looking for, a really high weaning weight EPD, but we're wanting the calf to come out unassisted, and then, hit the ground energetic, and then, at 200 pounds, we're going to put the feed on them, and then hopefully capitalize on those genetics. So that's kind of what we're looking for, a two-phase, a low birth weight, and then, some sort of growth carcass merit.
And do you AI, let's say you talk about 80% Brangus heifers, so do you breed those heifers to Brangus bulls, or in the first time you breed to Angus bulls?
On the first time, out of the 5 years, 4 years we've bred them to low birth weight Angus bulls. 1 year we bred to a low birth weight Brangus bull, and we had some success, but mainly we're just going. I think you could do either way. It's just our preference is to go with a low birth weight Angus bull.
Okay. And Matt, I think the last pillar of that program, right, is genetics, reproduction, and probably one of the most important is the nutrition.
Mm-hmm.
Can you please tell us what is your program from the time that you wean that animal to the time that you put the bull with the heifer?
Yeah, Joe. So typically we'll pick up these heifers, whether they're what we've bred as our cow herd, on the Pearce Cattle Company side, or cattle that we purchased from local ranchers. What we'll do is when they hit this place, they'll get a 21-day medicated weaning ration that it's all you can eat, and they'll eat 3% of body weight and gain 3.2 pounds a day. And that's critical because you're having to start out behind the 8 ball, because when you wean these calves in July and August, you have to get them to 750 or 800 pounds when you service them. So there's a certain window to meet your average daily gain. So if you can get it on the first 20 to 30 days, it helps. If you have to start out behind, then that's a hindrance. So then we transition to a Purina limiter ration, which is high in energy. They're on pasture, and if we have to, we'll supplement haylage to them, Hermathia haylage, which is what we've done the last 2 years, and it's really upped our performance. So when I say a limiter ration, it doesn't have salt in it or lemon in that way, or limiting by feed, because it's free choice every day in bulk feeders. So they're eating 1 to 1.25% of body weight. So those heifers average 7-8 pounds a day on intake. So as they get to 1.25%, we move to the next level. So there's a number 1, a number 2, a number 3. So you want to keep them at 1.25% body weight, because that's the biggest thing. You can feed a heifer, and you have to feed a heifer to breed her as yearling. There's no other way to do it. They just won't cycle. But then you can overfeed them, and it costs you too much. So we try to keep it in the middle. And it's so energy dense. That's what they're needing is energy. We can provide the protein and the forage, but we're deficient in energy. So that's what helps. And then, we have a target weight. This year, these heifers weighed 810 pounds, which was about 50 pounds better than last year, but we did some things different. When you're filling the feeders, you're always looking at your cost, and you're always trying to skimp, but we kept it in check this year. So our target on these through that nutritional program is to try to get 90+% bred, and that pays off if you do. So we feed those heifers straight through the breeding, 90 days. I've done research to where we take at a customer's location, we fed them through the breeding season, and you get 90%. The next year he thought he was going to take and save some money, so we fed him up until the day he turned the bulls in. So we fed him 90 days less, and he was 20% off on his conception rates on the same cattle. And that 20% of heifers, getting bred sure would have paid for the feed. So that's it. So then when we pull the bulls out, we transition them to a high fat molasses product and summer them on that.
And Matt, my last question to you today, it will be, you also have the experience to develop heifers in Georgia, Alabama, and in South Florida. So those are really different conditions. So can you please tell us your experience and the pros and cons of both systems?
Yeah, Joe, we've developed heifers in Perry, Georgia, in Cordele, Georgia, and it consistently still do in Mobile, Alabama, and then in Okeechobee, Florida. And the difference, I would say, is the Alabama and Georgia cattle are on some sort of winter forage, but they're also on feed. People that say that they can just do it on winter forage, I think they're pulling your leg. They have to put some feed with it. But it also, the reason we feed in Alabama is because it increases our stocking rate. We can put 500 head on less acres, so we feed them a little bit. Feed's cheaper up there, and we have the feed wagons and stuff that we don't have down here. In Georgia, the biggest thing is rotating on and off to where cattle aren't laying on the grazing. So we have a water in a pasture and then there's no water on the grazing, so they have to come out at night, or we'll push them out at night to save the grazing. there's a lot of expense in grazing. It's probably, around, I'd say, $180 to $200 an acre. So you've got that cost in it. You can do it a little cheaper, but then some of the cons are trucking cattle up and trucking cattle back. That expense in it, whether it be Alabama or Georgia. In Alabama, we've got the full facility, so we use it all year. In summer, we use crabgrass. In the winter, we use the forage, the winter forage. So we don't have to worry about moving cattle on and off. In Georgia, you're always working with a farmer. So you have to come in behind an early crop like corn. And if you come in behind cotton, then you're too late and you only get a short grazing period. And then you have to come off early because they're ready to plant another. So there's a lot of struggles in the Georgia deal unless it's dedicated farm or, grazing land. The one thing that's constant in Florida is I know what my feed cost is. It's provided every day through a bulk feeder. They're right here for me to see them, not like somebody else looking at them in Alabama or Georgia. And then this is actually where they're going to come back to, so that you haven't changed their system. In forage, they're getting a limited ration. They're on Hermathia, rough, tough grass, and that's what they're going to live the rest of their life on if they come back here. But all those systems work for a certain reason. Down here we don't have enough acreage to do the volume. In Alabama we do because that's the single source of what we do up there. So each place has its pros and cons, and it works as a unit. But I would say there's some other areas in North Florida that folks send cattle to that are on grazing and feed that work out really good. You just got to know your cost and have that in your budget and know that what you're feeding.
If on a general standpoint, if you have to think about cost, comparing both systems, like going north or staying here in South Florida, we would say it's better, comparable, or worse to raise heifers in South Florida?
I can raise a heifer in South Florida cheaper than I can in Georgia or Alabama. But it comes down to land. The land's worth more. We can do more with a cow-calf on it. So that's why we send the heifers up there because of volume. But it's costing about $350 a head in feed and medicine and mineral in Okeechobee. Now there's some other cost in that. It's about that or maybe a little bit less in Alabama. By the time you figure your planting cost, your handling and trucking, back and forth, because you're sending 100 up and you're sending 50 back, so you have some trucking. Now what we do is we own our own trucks up there, so those heifers are brought back as kind of a customer service. That's part of it. We sell those heifers delivered, so a guy doesn't have to worry about freight. But yeah.
So Matt, we are going to the end of our conversation today, and I will ask you 3 questions here. So if you have to select 2 cattle breeds that you like the most, which one would be?
Joe, if I had to select 2 breeds, the first one would be a half Simmental, half Angus for terminal. I mean, everybody's selling calves, and just so much more meat and bone if you're picking the right ones than just say a straight Angus the way the breed's gone. That's the one thing we've seen on Brahman type cows or English type cows. You're going to get more pounds. And if you breed those to the right Brahman type cows, you can keep all the heifers. So you're getting maternal and your terminal. And then the other breed would be some sort of Brahman. I'm not going to be specific. It may be a Brahman. It may be a Beefmaster. It may be a Brangus. But my training was we had a 3 breed rotation. It was Brahman, Hereford, and Angus. And until you breed those until you got too far one way, and then you bred back the other way. And that was before there was a lot of crossbred bulls in the 70s. So now you can use Brangus or Beefmaster and fill in those gaps, or straight Brahman to some English cattle, and that's what we try to do is match those up.
And if you have to select 2 forage species that you like.
2 forage species would be probably number 1, Bahia, just because it's so versatile, and if you manage it right and rotate on it, you can do good. You can cut some sod off of it. You can cut some seed. One thing, we renovate a lot of our pastures with aerators, and every time we break the ground, we're putting a hairy indigo or an astronomy or some sort of legume. And I think, Bahia grass with a legume is the best thing you can do. Hermathria has got a place with us. I mean, I like Hermathria. We've started cutting haylage and feeding haylage to our yearlings and to our bulls and some cows that we've got. So we'll cut haylage and then dry hay too. So we have some dedicated hay fields that we won't graze, but then I've got some other pastures. We have some heavy muck soils down on the lake that we plant Hermathria on, and we have a high stocking rate, but we also have some Bahia that we rotate on with it. So those would be the two grasses that I would.
And Matt, when you are not working, so what are the hobbies that you have that you like to do with your family and other things that you do in life?
Well, that's tough because I have two jobs with Purina and then with Pearce Cattle Company, and I do a lot with the Florida Cattlemen Association, being the president-elect and promoting our industry. I'm kind of a workaholic. I like to work, but whenever I take time, I like to go to Gator football games with my family and travel. I like to travel with my wife. We go to a lot of places and see a lot of things, and then I like to hunt with my kids. So that's pretty beneficial.
That's great. Matt, I would like to thank you today for your time and participating in the podcast. I am Joe Vendramini.
Joe what?